Hello, everyone. Welcome to our next episode of Real Squawk. It's been a while since we've done one of these, so we're really excited that we're back. My name is Jason Crean.
Yay.
I am in Orlando, Florida. I specialize in avian nutrition, but also have aviaries here where I breed softbills for the most part, including toucanets and aracari's. And I'll pass it off to Tiffany so she can introduce herself.
I'm gonna have to go next. Okay, I'm Tiffany. I'm also in Florida. I'm in McAlpin, which is in the middle of nowhere. Um, and I currently have small conures, a couple pairs of cockatoos, cacariquis, and a Finch aviary, along with poultry.
Jordan.
My name is Jordan Daniel. I am in the Dallas, Texas area. I specialize in raising lories and lorikeets. I also make high quality lory food. I supply retailers, zoos, and other breeders, pet owners as well. I do raise some cockatoo species, derby and parakeets, great-billed parrots. I haven't raised any of those yet, but I do keep them. And I'm trying to think of anything else. Yeah, that's it, I guess.
Highest quality, Lori.
Yes.
Lisa.
I forgot that I have lories too that came from Jordan. So yeah, I have lories too.
I also have lories from Jordan,
So does TJ.
but they're pets. Oh, is it my turn?
Yes, it's your turn.
Okay. I'm Lisa Bolstad. I am in Parker, Colorado. I help run Rocky Mountain Parrot, which is an education and rehoming organization in Colorado. And that's about it.
DJ.
I am TJ Pluid. I'm with the Florida Avian Conservancy in North Central Florida. I do a lot with like crown pigeons, pheasant pigeons, a lot of sirocco's, ocellated turkeys, pygmy geese, and some random quail species, things like that. And also have lories from Jordan.
I have a Lori from Jordan too. So I think we have all that in common.
Jordan gets around.
Yeah.
You guys are only my
I've got
friends
birds-
because
I've
I
got birds
send
from
you lories.
TJ and vice versa. So yeah. So TJ's new to the group, so we want to welcome him, and we really are grateful that he's here. He brings some expertise as well, having worked in the professional zoo field as also. So we're really excited that we have this well-rounded group all together. And we're all friends, which is really important because we get to share and, share the education, and it helps us all get better. So hopefully, now that we've talked about our intros, we're going to talk about hand feeding today. There's a lot of myths around hand feeding. There's a lot of questions about why hand feed, and we'll hit some of those as we talk today. But we wanted to start with equipment. Weighing obviously is really important for all birds, but in particular, it's important when you're raising chicks. So anybody want to share like how they collect data as far as weights go when they're raising chicks?
I guess I can start there. So the two scales pictured are the ones I use. The very flat one I use for neonate babies. And we record a weight off them before the first feeding in the morning, so when they're as empty as they can be. And that's our only weight we do for the day is the first in the morning. And as the birds grow, we progress to the scale with perches on it, so it's easier to get the bird there without stressing it out and forcing it to stay in one spot. It actually wants to sit there.
For me, I personally, I'm kind of lazy when it comes to this stuff, so I don't have like a data sheet or anything like that when it comes to keeping track of the growth of chicks. With lories and cockatoos, for me, it's very, very easy to see if they're growing correctly or not. Lories and cockatoos can stunt easily if they're not getting the nutrition that they need. So I'm a visual person, visual learner. So that's kind of how I keep track of things. I'm sure I could do a data sheet and stuff like that if I wanted to. But yeah, because I raise so many at once, depending on the time of the year, it's just I evaluate each chick, make sure they have a really strong feeding response. They're eating as frequently as they should be eating, and that's kind of just how I do things when it comes to checking their weight.
Honestly, same. I think the most that I tracked weights was when I was doing the Fit Babies, and the toucanettes. But for me, the most important weight that I would track, or when I was weighing birds, would be when I was selecting birds for breeding. So especially when I was breeding Gouldian finches, I really wanted birds to be in a specific weight range, or with parrotlets, I wanted to make sure that they were more robust birds. And the way that I would weigh them, because they were all flighted, was take a washcloth and a little bin, like a bin that I would keep babies in, and weigh the washcloth in the bin and tear it out, and then burrito the bird into it, so then I could get a kind of an idea for weight. But in terms of the babies, like Jordan said, I can typically look at a bird and know if something's off. And then I'm usually messaging Jordan or Chris asking what to do.
And Jordan and Tiffany, you're the sole hand feeders, right? You're doing all the hand feeding, so you're accustomed, like you're very accustomed to seeing the same birds every single day. So
Oh yeah.
on those things. Yeah, I use a gram scale too, obviously. I have volunteers that come through who are interning and learning how to do these things, so I'm not the only one. So we do keep a data sheet, just so if someone records a 4-gram loss on one of the toucans, for example, that can mean like we need to up the feeding. And if they lose weight a second day, then we have to look for yeast infections and things like that. Generally, we don't have any of those problems because we're proactive about those, but that's very much why we collect that long-term data, just to track. I was the second in the country last year to breed the group-built toucanettes. And so like we didn't know much about those. So I just collected data because I want to be able to look back and say, this is kind of our foundational data, our baseline. But gram scales are everything. They come in really handy, especially if you have a bird that's off a bit and you can kind of track just to make sure.
Oh yeah, I'm sure they're useful for sick birds too.
Oh yeah, because I don't breed, but I have a gram scale. I use it all the time.
Yeah.
Are you using it for birds though? I'm just kidding.
Clearly using it for myself.
So I love these shot glasses. This is priceless. TJ, I think you added this. You want to start?
Yeah, we do a lot of shots around here. I use different sets of shot glasses and measuring spoons. So you can see there's 3 different colors of shot glasses. I use black for grain-eating birds, green for fruit doves, and then red for great blue turacos, usually another turaco species. And that just, even though most of us can look at the formula and know which is which, the color coordinating just kind of eliminates room for error. And these ones are actually marked in ounces, milliliters, and one other measurement, they're tablespoons. And so you can actually monitor how much you're feeding out through that if you're not counting in your head through a measured syringe or something like that. And the scoops on the side, I use a different set for dry goods than I do for liquid additives into formulas, just to keep things more sanitary.
That's a good idea. I never thought about
I know. I want to know where you got those shot glasses from, because that's actually really helpful.
Pretty sure they're from Amazon.
Oh.
There you go.
For everything else.
Everything, yeah.
They're not cheap, but they last forever.
Yeah. Yeah, because with when you said counting in your head, like we have to do with toucans, they don't have a crop, so you can't see when they're full. So you have to do measured feeding. So when we weigh the birds in the morning, we do 10% of that. So if it's 100 grams, that means 10 cc's per feeding. And then you can only do 0.5 to 1 cc at a time because they have to swallow it. You have to watch it go down. And so that this would come in very handy so that you know about how much you've scaled and fed. So that's definitely helpful. And feeding needles.
Got a lot of options.
Yeah.
I use probably different ones than most of the citizen people use because there's no like pumping action when you're feeding out. So I don't need to necessarily have lure locks and all of that. And I can use, the little cannula tips that everyone's terrified of them falling off, and it totally does happen. But when I do mostly pigeon species with those and really, really young Taracos, they still get a tip like that. And with those, there's no real action that's going to remove that tip, so it's not really a concern for us. But with those baby pigeons,
you're talking about the white plastic tip on the right picture here, right?
Yeah. The other picture is just a gavage set. I don't want to gavage anything, but some birds just never really develop a good feeding response and need gavage that way. Sometimes they just start crashing and need medicated via gavage. So I just put that there to show all the different sizes and shapes that we used. And that varies widely on the age of the bird and the species of the bird and all that. And then like the hand feeding spoon, I don't use the normal ones that parrot people use. I use a really rounded one. And with the birds I'm using, I'm not using the spoon end. I'm using the handle end just to get little bites of food and they pick it right off instead of like using tweezers or something like that. That keeps it stainless steel, so it's easier to clean and all that. And I used a lot of those curved tip syringes on pigeon species. Basically, you just need to get the food past their glottis and you can load them up. And so that curved tip puts the food intake just behind the glottis and makes those larger pigeon species much easier.
Yeah, for me, I've experimented with all kinds of different stuff, and it's about what you're comfortable with. And so let's say I have a just hatched rainbow lorikeet or something like that, or even a blue crown that's super tiny. So I don't feel confident enough to use a cannula or anything like that on those. I use the very small bent spoon, it has the bent tip. So I'll feed a very tiny chick up until they're like a week or so old. And then I kind of transition to the cannula. And then once they're maybe like 3 to 4 weeks old, then I'm using a lure lock, and the tip is a soft silicone tip. So I don't have to worry about puncturing the throat or the crop or anything like that. And then for larger species like cockatoos that feed, they're super vigorous when they feed. They have that strong pumping feeding response. You want to be real careful with those, not to use a gavage or a hard tipped cannula, because you can puncture. And it's happened to others before. And knock on wood, it hasn't happened to me, but I've always been warned, to kind of stay away from that stuff when it comes to cockatoos, the rose-breasted cockatoos, major Michels. Most of the Australian cockatoos have a really strong feeding response. So for those guys, I do the soft silicone tips as well, and they make them in several different sizes.
Yeah, I use the second from right, that 1 cc syringe. That I use that pretty much religiously with the toucanets and arsaris, because they can only have little bits of food, but they graduate throughout the feeding by actually eating solid food. So I can hand them little chunks of fruit, and they'll take those and swallow them. So I know people who do complete formula feeding of ram fasteds, toucans, arsaris, toucanets, all the way through to weaning. I know people that don't do any formula feeding and they only do like chunks of fruit throughout. But I find that I can keep the weight on the birds best if I mostly formula feed with supplementation. I never give straight formula to any bird. It's always mixed with pureed blueberries and fruit, something like that. And then start adding intermittently giving them solid foods so that they practice. And then when they get close to weaning, just putting the fruit in a bowl and shoveling it towards them. And as soon as they see it start to move, they start to learn how to pick things up, but they're really awkward during that stage. So they'll grab things and drop them because they just don't know what to do with it yet. They need that throwback. They learn how to throw back food into those long beaks. But yeah, I use that 1cc syringe pretty much religiously with all those birds.
I'm in the same boat as Jordan. I like the Miracle O-ring syringes because the that little black plunger that you can see doesn't stick in those Miracle syringes. And then I transitioned to doing predominantly the Lure Lock versions, and then I buy those Innovet tips. So those Innovet Lure Lock tips like screw into that Lure Lock. But I'll start out using them with no tips on them, just like that middle 1cc syringe when they're super tiny, and then move them into using a silicone tip when they get to a bigger age. With the Kakarikis, when I first pull them, I tend to use a spoon because they take a long time to adjust to being hand fed, especially if you pull them at an older age. And they're also just such a pain in the butt to feed that sometimes feeding them with a spoon is a little bit more safe than syringe feeding them because they are the queens and kings of aspirating. And just because of how quickly food passes through their digestive system too, it's easier for me to supplement whole food into their formula if I spoon feed it because it won't pull into a syringe. So,
yeah.
And I don't use the gavages at all unless I'm medicating because with the formulas that I use, it won't even pass through those tips. Like it's too grainy.
When I've hand-fed palm cockatoos, it's very common to chop nuts and mix that with the formula so it's really thick. And breeders have said that that's just a better way to do it. It gives their bodies a way to really extract nutrient, but it also increases the fiber intake. And they use spoons, they use spoon feeding for that because it's obviously so chunky, but that's something that's really beneficial for that species. So.
Yeah, you definitely want to make sure that those tips, if you are using them are on there and will not slip off. I'll tell you guys, you guys may not know already, but so when I first started hand feeding rose-breasted cockatoos, I lost one because the syringe on the left, I had ordered one similar to that off Amazon, and that one came with a long rubber tube basically, and it wasn't on there correctly. Well, the bird ended up swallowing the whole thing. I had to try to extract it. I ended up taking the bird to the vet, excuse me. And the vet took it out, but by the time I got the bird home, the bird ended up dying because his crop was so bruised up just from that vet battling with that, tube to get that tube out. So yeah, I mean, everybody learns from experience. Unfortunately, I did lose that bird and I felt terrible, but yeah, if you're going to be using syringes with feeding tips and everything like that, lure lock is the way to go unless you have something zip tied on there super strong, and yeah, so just be careful with what you use, and if you're not comfortable with something, that's totally fine. I learned because trial and error, that's how everybody learns. So yeah, just wanted to share that with you guys.
So mixing formula.
Distilled or reverse osmosis water.
So with that slide, I just wanted to show a few different things. Distilled or RO water are your go-tos. Tap water can have contaminants in it, as can some well waters. Don't use a microwave. It creates hot spots and cold spots and can have little gas bubbles in it and all sorts of stuff that is not conducive to hand feeding a baby. Keep a thermometer handy by your formula. You can always temp check it really quick before you feed just to make sure everything's where it should be temperature wise. And then just pay attention to viscosities and ages, and that applies to species too, like the palm cockatoo being so chunky. And I'm over here feeding a pheasant pigeon that gets a watery formula until it's almost fledged. So pay attention to your viscosities quite a bit. And yeah, the last part, just different species have vastly different requirements. I hand feed about 20 different species right now, and so it's always something you have to have in the back of your head for what bird is in front of you.
Mhm.
Yeah, and a lot of it is networking and learning from others.
Yeah.
It's amazing how just the slightest nuance can make such a difference when you're feeding a new species. It really makes a huge difference, and that's why I'm so grateful for all of you, because I think we all, no matter how long we've been doing this, we're always learning and improving practice. I use reverse osmosis as well. I have a system that just plugs into your plumbing so that I can get hot water directly out there. It's scalding hot, but at least it's evenly hot, so I can let it cool when I make formula.
Right.
But yeah, I never microwave. Microwaving is just a recipe for disaster. I use digital thermometers so that I can start with the species that I'm raising. I don't keep it above 100 degrees. By the time I'm done, it's cooled. But most of the birds I'm feeding don't have a crop, so the food's going into their system right down, and it's not sitting in a crop where it's more exposed to the environment, I guess you could say, temperature-wise, the ambient temperature. So it's a little
Right.
bit different, but
So I have a question. So I was always told that distilled water was a no-go. Is
Mhm.
there a certain reason why you guys maybe differ from that, or yeah, just kind of explain that? Because I'm
For us,
genuinely
with
curious.
distilled, our well water is not quite right for basically the great blue Turacos are the most sensitive thing we're working with.
Mhm.
And distilled is about the only thing we found that doesn't cause anything harmful to the chicks. Like a lot of the other waters open them up to being susceptible for transmission of whatever's in that water.
Mhm.
And so we've always used distilled, even through the weaning process. They're still getting distilled, and we kind of have to wean them onto well water.
Mhm. Okay.
You can't just
But
use like regular bottled water. It has to be distilled.
we do the distilled bottled water, yeah.
I
No, yeah.
use reverse osmosis, but it's remineralized. So, a lot of reverse osmosis systems that you would just buy for your home
Mhm.
even if you just have pet birds to give them clean water, which you should be drinking reverse osmosis yourself, but they come with those cartridges that remineralizes the water. So our water, we wanted to make sure there was no iron, because I'm dealing with iron sensitive species out there like toucan. So we went reverse osmosis, and it's been amazing. It's been such a difference. So
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
definitely the direction we would like to go with it. We just don't have a system installed yet, so we're on the distilled wagon for now.
mhm.
Yeah, when I first moved out here to Texas, um, we have city water, even though I'm out in the country. The thing with this water though was when I was using this water to mix up nectar and stuff like that. Well, I had several different birds that were not near each other whatsoever. They started to vomit and throw up, but they would go to the water bowl and they would drink water, but then they throw it back up. So we ended up having that water tested, and the chlorine levels were astronomical. And so we installed a water softening system, and I haven't had that problem since. But I've always been curious about distilled and reverse osmosis. What would be more beneficial for them, especially if you're thinking about iron and calcium and stuff like that that's in the water. So yeah, it's good to know.
Yeah, and reverse osmosis systems, you can get them on Amazon. They're not super expensive anymore. And you have to buy the cartridges, but it's not like you have to change them often. So it's definitely
Okay.
something to look forward to. And the one I have for the birds, drinking water is literally just hooked up to my faucet and comes right out of the drum, and it's like 5 gallons at a time. So it's really easy to use, really easy to install.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's worth it. Definitely worth it.
Yeah, I want to look
Especially with
into
iron
it.
sensitive species like you've got. So
Yeah, and I definitely want to look into it too because, it kind of makes you wonder if whenever you get a bird that falls ill and gets sick, especially a lory, because their diet is a liquid diet, it makes you wonder, well, is it in the water? Because you are using that water to mix up their nectar. So, yeah, I'm not totally sure if a water softener takes out that bad bacteria or anything like that. So it might be worth it to look into the other system.
it might create an environment that is inhospitable to some of those things, maybe not filtering them out.
Mhm.
But that brings me back to these. Years ago, I was working with someone who was hand rearing Quakers, and
Mhm.
she all of a sudden started losing babies, and they found it was a Pseudomonas infection. And Pseudomonas is an opportunistic bacteria which loves the inside of plastic tubing. And I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
that's what a syringe is, right? So
Yeah.
Pseudomonas is opportunistic in that it doesn't have to be around food. It can just live in an aquatic, like just where there's a little bit of water, and that can kill chicks very, very quickly. And she, to this day, doesn't know how that bacteria made it into her water system.
Yeah.
So, reverse osmosis and filtered waters, I think critical. So I
Mhm.
would definitely always use that, but sterilizing syringes, I
Right.
soak mine in chlorhexidine, Novacen or whatever they call
Mhm.
it, but always making sure they're clean and never just left out. I know some people will blow dry the inside of them
Mhm.
so that there's hot air going through and no moisture inside at all.
Mhm.
Um, you know, some people autoclave them, whatever it takes. But yeah, definitely. I just thought I'd mention that keeping those things clean is critical. So
Yep. Absolutely. Oh, and then so I don't hold on to syringes. I'll probably use them for like 3 days. And then once that black ink on the syringe starts to, melt away or come off, then it's time for a new one.
yeah,
It's not worth using an old syringe over and over and over again and then, you end up with a sick bird or several sick birds. So, and then, sorry, I keep coming back to that. So if I have a group of babies that are different ages, a different age from another group of babies, those syringes that I use, I don't mix them up. So that bin gets this syringe, the other bin gets this syringe. I don't cross contaminate that way. Then you run into problems.
now, Lisa, you've had birds where you've had to hand feed them because you don't have breeder birds, you're not hand rearing chicks, but you've had to use syringes to administer food to sick birds, correct?
Yeah,
What type
yeah.
what type of things? And you're strictly parrots, right? Hookbills.
Right,
So
yeah.
what have you found over the years is most amenable to that?
I like that syringe that you showed in the picture, that the one far on the far right with the kind of curvy tip.
Mhm.
That's easy to kind of get under their tongue and over, because when you're feeding a sick bird, you have to do just like, it's almost like administering medication. You just have to do a little bit, little bit,
Mhm.
and that seems to work really well. It doesn't, the size of the like how many milliliters it'll hold doesn't matter so much. It's just that curvy tip works well.
Yeah, to kind of brace it in place when you're trying to get
Right.
something.
Get it, and to get it under their tongue and kind of over to that left side.
Mhm.
Is that something you would use? Like, let's say you have a bird that's not eating at all and you want to get food into the crop,
Hmm.
and put some weight on it. Is that the type of syringe you would use, or
Yeah,
would
because you
you?
can kind of get it right at the opening there and kind of just
Okay.
squirt it down in there. Um, you can gavage feed them too. That's not something
Mhm.
I can do it. It's not something that I'm super comfortable with.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can do it in an emergency, but I have friends that are vet techs that I can talk into coming over and doing that if I need to.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's always good to keep this stuff on hand no matter what you do.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you have
Never
any
know.
animal, keep this stuff on hand, as even medications and stuff like that. Antibiotics, I have a cupboard full of them,
Yeah.
just in case. You never know when you're going to need them. There's, not everybody has access to a vet, or even emergency vet right away. So you have to kind of take matters into your own hands when it comes to that stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, even if you just have pets, you should know how to hand feed, and you should know how to gavage feed too if you have to in an emergency. That, and the third thing you should know is how to do subcutaneous fluids
Mhm.
if you have to do that in an emergency.
Right.
Yeah, lots of skills that you can only get by learning from others, right?
Well, and then, I learned from failure, that's how most people learn. So it sucks, but for next time or down the road. Granted, nobody wants sick birds or any animal, but yeah, it comes in handy to know that stuff.
Well, and no one's above that, right? No matter whether you're in a rehoming situation, whether you're just a pet owner and you have one bird, whether you're a breeder or, in conservation and zoos, everyone learns from failure. And that's why doing things like this where we talk amongst ourselves is so important, because no one's above it. Everyone has done something that, unfortunately, when you have livestock, you will have dead stock, right? That's what they say. So, you want to do your best and you want to keep learning and not say, we've always done it this way. Those are the worst words in the English language, right? You always are learning. So
you definitely have to be prepared for the worst. I know when I've lost birds before, the first couple of losses were always hard, emotionally. You kick yourself in the butt and you're like, I should have done this, or I could have done this. But in reality, that's life. You can't save them all. You can just try your best, and knock on wood, they pull through and they survive. But yeah, that's how everybody learns, is from loss,
Well, and
unfortunately.
so much of what we know is because of breeders who have had a lot of trial and error over the years. And
Right.
so a lot of what we know about saving birds and keeping them healthy is because we've learned from breeders who have done this for years. And so that has to be said. And that's really, really important. I know I put a couple of quick videos in here, like this. So these are the Grooveville toucanets from last year. That's a really short video. But these are about 9 days old. And you can see, I'm just gonna pause it. You can see they're bald. Toucans are interesting because they don't ever produce down feathers, so they're never fuzzy. Their feathers just come through like porcupine quills. It's got to be itchy. And you can see their eyes are closed. Their eyes are actually closed for the first few weeks, so they don't open as early as some other birds. And these same birds, just a few weeks, this is just a couple weeks later. Oh, sorry, this is a green R, sorry. But that bird's about 3 weeks old. Its eyes are just starting to open there, between 3 and 4 weeks old. But you can see the feathers coming through, no down, no fuzz. And you can see, holding the syringe on my right hand, pointing in so that it's going down. And you can see its esophagus right here. You can literally watch the food go down. It doesn't go into a crop because they don't have one really. It's just going straight down. And so we do watch to make sure that the back of their throat is clear after each syringe full, and then that it's going down that way. Okay, there we go. And then those same 3 birds, this is them 4 weeks later when they're just starting to take solid food. And they're not that great at it. But you can see they're learning how to pick up and then do that projectile throwback. Yeah, that middle one's got it down, as you can tell. So and like I said, I supplement. I never use formula on its own. I'm always supplementing with those. I use pureed fruit, sometimes baby food. That's just fruit, no additives or anything like that. And that's something I use that's pretty common. Tiffany and I have been working over the past couple of years on adding whole foods to the formula for chicks to see what results that brings up. Because a simple hand feeding formula can't possibly give every chick of every species the same result, right? So we do add things to make sure that we're giving them the very best start that we can. I think that we're not nourishing the nervous system as much as we can if we just use hand feeding formula. Omega-3 fatty acids play an important role in the development of that. So I think supplementing hand feeding formula is pretty important. Tiff, do you want to just talk through the 4 things that you tried here?
Sure. So I think what I use most often lately when I do add stuff in is soaked and sprouted seed. And the mix that I like to use the most is the Napoleon blend from Tops, because none of the seed in that besides the flax has it's all hulled, so you don't have to worry about the shells. And the other thing that I'll do, especially with the cockatoos, is also walnuts and pecans, and then use a mortar and pestle to kind of grind them up and uh, mix that in with the formula when they're a smaller size, because I can use a spoon. I saw Miguel using a larger spoon for his black palm babies, and I asked him if it was something that he bought, and he actually told me that they bent theirs themselves. And I had a really embarrassing experience last year trying to bend a spoon myself, and yeah, slammed my toe with the hammer that I was trying to push down the spoon with.
Oh no.
So
The
I haven't
lengths we
tried
go
that.
to for our birds.
So I haven't tried that again. I just use the spoon until they get to a certain age. And then what's interesting is with the pecans and the walnuts, if I use my Ninja, I can actually blend it up with water and get it to a consistency where I can pull it through the larger syringes. I just can't, it's like there's a weird timeline where it won't work in a syringe and it'll only work in a spoon. And then with the supplement powders, it's the green. Is it called the green forage powder or just the green powder?
This is the green biodiversity powder.
Okay, yeah. And that one too, sometimes it depends on the size of the syringe you're using, because it does have black sesame seeds in it. So if you use something like a Fruit Ninja or that's a video game. If you use like a bullet or a Ninja blender to blend it up with the nuts and stuff, I can blend it and then keep it in the fridge for 2 days. And then I probably would give everyone anxiety if I talk about temperatures with the formula, because when I am adding that stuff, since I'm refrigerating it, I've learned the balance. And I use an electric kettle. So my kettle goes from, it has like increments in temperature. And I just know, because I've been doing this for 2 years now, I know that if I've got refrigerated, pureed fruit and veg or refrigerated soaked nuts, I know that my kettle needs to be at this temperature to be able to then mix it with the formula and the water to get it down to be like 100. Because if I tried it before, it'd be like, then it's too cold, and then I try to heat it back up and then it's too hot. So I know, for instance, that if I'm using baby food, I know that my kettle needs to be at 122, and by the time I add the cold baby food, it gets it to that like 100, 104 mark. But yeah, so that's predominantly what I've been doing, is the pureed fruit, veg, and I try to do fruits and veg that don't have a lot of seed content. So if I do a fruit, it's blueberries, apples. If I do a veg, I usually do greens or broccoli, because the broccoli blends really well. Squash, but you have to make sure that you don't get the seeds with it, and sweet potato work really well too. So yeah.
Yeah, blending. The powder can come without the sesame seeds, and that blends really well if you're using syringe feeding. Or you can just sift them out because they're really easy to sift out too. But yeah, so we used a lot of Tiffany's birds to test this out. This is her setup using a lot of different foods. These are parent-fed crops. You can see the actual food inside of them.
Yeah.
And then she started looking at formula-fed birds compared to other birds from the same parents, even who were on the supplement, and looking at what the differences were. And this, I think you sent me these. This was the first time you sent me these, and I was floored when I saw the difference. Could you?
Yeah. So the top two pictures are. This is two. I said three. It's probably going to be three times that my dog interrupt. So the top photos are the same baby from a pair of parrotlets. I think that, like, I guess, yes, there's the lighting is a little bit different because the top one, you can see that there's a flash, but I feel like that is neither here nor there when you just look at the vibrancy of the color. The bottom chick is the exact same pair of birds, just supplement fed instead of formula only.
And
so
FIT stands for Citizen Hand Feeding Improvement Technique. So this has been an ongoing experiment that Tiffany and I have been doing to show that there is a difference. And I've used tea, different types of teas in place of water, and have seen improvements in feather quality and everything with chicks and color. So there's definitely something to be said for simple additives when it comes to enhancing the formula.
This was a different example. So this is a kakariki, and this is a baby from, well, two different babies from the same pair. But the top baby is fit fed, and the bottom one is formula only. And in this one, I feel like what I'm really noticing was the feather quality. Like the bottom just they look dusty.
Yeah.
And then this is another example. So on the left is formula only, on the right is fit fed and from the same pair. And again, I'm just looking at the feather quality, the depth of color in the feathers, and these, at least this is in the same house. So the lighting is a little bit more consistent than that first set of photos was, but yeah, I feel like you can really see it here. So on the left is formula only, and on the right, those are fit fed babies. They're also just like way more robust, and it could just be because kakarikis, like I said, their digestive tracts are, I don't know if it's metabolism, I don't know what it is, but for the size compared to something like a parrotlet, their crops empty so fast, and adding that supplemented ingredients into the formula really helps keeps them satiated, so they're not scrambling around screaming constantly because they're starving. It keeps them satiated, but also I feel like they're just little chunks. Like, look at them, they're just much more like robust, and they just look better.
I
Even
think
the vibrancy of the sorry, Jason.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, even the vibrancy of the plumage is totally, you can totally see the difference.
Well, I feel like you can also, it's kind of strange, but I feel like you can also see it in their eyes. Like the eyes are just much brighter and more alert.
Right.
And I think that has a lot to do with nourishing the developing nervous system. I don't think we do enough to I still think that we have a lot of pluckers and things like that because we're not giving them a good start. I think this enhancing formula is a great place to start to improve our technique. So it's very, very clear. I mean, these these parrotlets, I mean, they're just, the body condition's amazing.
That bottom one looks like a pigeon.
Yeah.
It makes me sad I got rid of my parrotlets, but yeah. Yeah, and I think I don't know if I have a slide in here about it. I'm sorry, I should have reviewed this beforehand. But the other thing that I noticed significantly with supplementing their formula is that when you're starting to wean them, it's much easier to wean them onto raw food because they've already like they
They
taste
recognize
it.
it as food.
Yeah.
Well, and they're not always acting hungry, I'm sure, too. Like they're
Yeah.
starving, they need something. Yeah.
Hey, that's your little turd burglar, Lisa.
Oh, is that river on the bottom?
Yeah. I registered her or when I sent her DNA and I think I put it in as turd burglar because she wouldn't tell me what name. And then that's the severe macaw that you had, Jordan.
Oh. Yeah,
You can just tell. I mean, you can just look at these birds and tell how robust and healthy they are.
well, and then on the severe, you did the green powder into his formula, right? And some other
Yeah.
stuff too. And I mean, he still is gorgeous. And when I've seen and compared photos of others with severe macaws that were raising babies compared to him, the difference in feather quality, vibrancy, and even the size of the bird was totally like night and day, you know? And I think, yeah, it's just people think that formula is a one size fit all, and it's not, you know?
Yeah, and I think
Was there
I think when you're giving them whole food as part of their feeding regimen, their digestive system's learning how to digest things, right? It's like it's absorbing the nutrients that you're adding from whole food are more bioavailable. So the body's more able to absorb those nutrients and use them, where highly processed food is not as assimilable, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's harder to get those nutrients in. So I think Tiffany has done a phenomenal job by testing out these different whole food additives to the formula because I mean, the pictures speak for themselves. It's incredible.
Look at the breast on that canary wing. Jeez.
Yeah, and I
it's
mean
like
these aren't fat
overfeed?
birds. Their condition's good. So,
Yeah.
and I mean, when you look at beak quality, I mean, you just look at all their beaks, and I mean, you can just tell that they're getting useful proteins and putting those amino acids to work to build all of those structural things that can be a real challenge for birds that are just formula fed. So if you want to see more episodes, we have them up on our channel. So please feel free. I think TJ, did you want to try to?
Um, maybe on the next one while I'm not dealing with the phone issue.
Okay. Okay. TJ has to go hand feed, which is why I wanted to give him a chance to do that. But we really appreciate it. Thanks everybody for the conversation. I think this was great. This is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to raising chicks and using hand feeding, you know, for a lot of different reasons. But our goal is always to improve the lives of the birds we're keeping, and that's why we're doing this. So thank you, everybody, and hopefully we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.